Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever struggled to find your life purpose, feel completely stuck, or wonder why you keep repeating pattern after pattern after pattern, or why you feel like you keep being a victim, then do we have the illuminating show for you. Today we'll be talking with Rob Schwartz, a pioneer in the field of pre-birth planning, the study of how and why we plan our own lives, and the author of 2 groundbreaking books, Your Soul's Plan, Discovering the Real Meaning of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born, and Your Soul's Gift, The Healing Power of the Life You Planned Before You Were Born. And that's just what I want to talk with Rob about today, about understanding our life's plan from before we were born, and how we can move past our stuck patterns to live our greatest lives. That plus we'll talk about whales, elephants, horses, and more, and why in the world our pets are here. So welcome to the show, Rob. Are you ready to shine?
Ready to shine, Michael.
Woohoo! Well, thank you so much for being here. You know, before we dive right into things, I wonder if we can go back into a time machine a little bit, and if you can go back to what your life was like before May 7th, 2003.
The date that you're referencing is the day on which I had my first session ever with a psychic medium, as you know. And that was through mediumship that I researched the 2 books I wrote. We'll talk about that later, but prior to that date, I was actually in the corporate sector. I have an MBA, which I imagine is atypical for the author of a couple of New Age books. So I was doing freelance corporate marketing and communications. And I found it to be tremendously boring, tremendously unfulfilling. I had the feeling that there were so many other people who could be plugged into my position and do the very same thing. In other words, it didn't feel like a unique soul calling for me. And it was that feeling of discontent that led to the session with the medium, in which I asked basically, what can I do with my life? And the answer came in a most unexpected way, and it led to the 2 books.
Now, were you at that time feeling there has to be more for my life? This just doesn't feel like what I signed up for?
Yeah, that was exactly the feeling. You know, I had the sense that if I fell off the face of the earth, my clients would just plug somebody else into my position and carry right along. I also had the distinct sense that I had certain abilities, which in my belief system come from God, from a higher power. Mm-hmm. And I had the sense that I was to use these. I knew that writing was one of them. That's something I've always enjoyed and been good at. But I had the feeling that the corporate arena was not the place that I was supposed to apply my writing skills. I just didn't have any idea where to take those writing skills at that time.
So you go in, you meet with a medium. This is something I've got to imagine is, if not out of your comfort zone, is completely new to say the least for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And what were you told, and how were you able to wrap around that what you're being told is real?
The medium started by introducing me to the concept of spirit guides, which I had never even heard of at the time. She explained that a spirit guide is a highly evolved non-physical being with whom we plan our lives before we're born, and who then guides us through our lives after we come into body. Then she started to channel my spirit guides. And they started to talk to me about all the challenges I had experienced in life. They knew about them without me telling them anything.
So if I pause you there briefly, she's saying, because I've gone through a little bit of this myself, she's saying, well, they said that you went through this experience, or she was actually speaking for them and saying, you went through this experience.
A lot of it was direct channeling.
Okay.
So they were speaking through her. But they offered an explanation, very cogent, very detailed, as to why I had experienced a lot of my challenges. And, you know, when you're talking to beings who know everything about you like that, without you telling them anything, it gives them a lot of credibility. So I was inclined to believe what they were saying, partly because they knew everything about me, but, you know, even more so, Michael, because it resonated as truth. My logical mind was screaming, this is crazy, what are you doing, talking to a medium, get out of here, go put the day to good use, you know. But in my heart, in my gut, I could feel truth in what was being said. And I chose to go with my intuition and just let those logical doubts fall by the wayside.
What exactly were they telling you, and how did your ego handle it? And by ego, I'm not talking about I'm a great person. I'm talking about that, as many people call it, the small self.
Yeah. My ego is saying that, this is ridiculous. How can this be? Mediumship is not at all part of my background. I grew up in a very logic-oriented family. I have an education based on the scientific method. I had never been to a medium before. I'm not sure if I even knew somebody who had been to a medium. So my egoic mind is saying, this is crazy. But the information that was coming through made a lot of sense, and they were talking about different challenges I had experienced. I grew up in an abusive household, and there was an explanation offered which resonates as truth to me as to why I would have chosen those sorts of circumstances before I was born. And a lot of it had to do with speaking my truth courageously, which apparently I was unable to do in more than one past life.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I just sensed truth in what was being said.
So it's something you call in your book. You said that it triggered a profound awakening, or more of a remembering.
Yeah. Yes.
What does that mean?
To me, awakening or remembering means that you come into some sense that you are more than the body, more than the personality, more than your thoughts, more than your feelings. These are things that you have, things that you carry with you throughout the lifetime. But just because you have something, that doesn't mean that you are the thing you have. If you have a horse, it doesn't mean that you are a horse. And by the same token, just because you have a body, a personality, thoughts, feelings, that doesn't mean that you are those things. So I came into an understanding, a knowing that I'm an eternal being, that I'm so much more than the things that I carry through this lifetime.
So that's huge to say.
Yeah.
And so what was the next step? How did it come about that you started helping others with this? Because I imagine that was a step on this path way before you started writing these books.
Well, the next step, which happened just a couple weeks, I think, after the session with the medium, I had a spiritually transformative experience, which to this day is the most profound experience I've ever had. I was doing nothing more than walking down the sidewalk, walking down the street, and all of a sudden, every time I looked at another person, I had this feeling of complete, overwhelming, pure, unconditional love for them. And when I say unconditional love in this context, I'm not talking about the kind of love you might feel for a parent or a child or a romantic partner. This was an experience of divine love. It was truly a transcendent experience. So the first person I saw was a cab driver sitting behind the wheel of his cab, just waiting for a fare to come along. And I felt this pure, amazing, unconditional love for him. And then I looked up, and there was a man's barber shop in the corner. I looked through the window, and I saw the barber cutting a client's hair. Again, there was this pure, unconditional love for those two people. Then I turned around, and I saw a young woman, a mother, pushing an infant in a stroller down the sidewalk. And again, that feeling was present. Now, I had never had an experience like this before. I never even heard of anything like this. But I understood intuitively as it was happening what it was. And what it was is that I was in some kind of enhanced immediate communion with my own soul. So it's as though my soul were saying to me, this love is who you really are. This is your true nature. What I didn't know at the time, but later discovered, is why it was happening then. And the reason was that my soul would have known that I was going to go on to write books about pre-birth planning. When I wrote those books, every pre-birth plan we looked at was based on unconditional love. And this is true even when a negative role was being scripted for someone. So had I not had that experience of myself as unconditional love, I think I would have doubted the results of my own research. But having had that experience, I can say to your viewers that we are beings made from unconditional love, and our life plans are truly based on unconditional love.
So when you talk about pre-birth planning, you're talking about meeting with your spirit guides and saying, let's come up with an idea. For instance, we were talking off air beforehand. I had one near-death experience, ended up with a titanium femur and hip in one leg and an inch leg length discrepancy. 7 years, 17 days, 7 years, 1 month, 17 days later, I have a second near-death accident, end up with a matching titanium femur, matching hip on the other side, that the doctors say no odds, and I'm going, there's no way matching could happen on your own. So this is something you're saying that was scripted, and you might even know it because certain punctuation marks will take place.
I certainly believe that what you've experienced was planned by you before you were born. Now, what I don't know is if you planned the specific events that you just described, or more generally, a plan to have something like that happen without specifying the form. But there's no doubt in my mind, based upon my belief system, that these were the sorts of experiences you wanted to have.
It's fascinating. So if we go back, and I want to talk about why you wrote these books and so much more, but you brought up something earlier that maybe is a great place to start. You said that you grew up in an abusive childhood, and your mom, from what I read, is verbally abusive.
That's correct.
And that is actually something that, in a sense, you signed up for.
Yes, my understanding is that I've had past lives in which I had a certain truth that I wanted to speak and didn't have the courage to speak it. One of these was in Atlantis. I was a citizen there, opposed to what the government was doing, but lacked the courage to speak out. There was a similar incarnation in Nazi Germany, where I was a German citizen, opposed to what the Nazis were doing, but lacked the courage to speak out. When I had my life review, as we all do, I saw that I lacked the courage to speak my truth, and I wanted to have another go at that. I wanted to have an incarnation in which it would take some courage to put out an unusual truth, like the one we're talking about now. But I wanted to rise to the challenge, so to speak, in ways that I had not in previous lifetimes. The experience with my mother as a child gives me a lot of motivation to do that, because the books are all about healing. And so what I'm trying to do is offer a healing perspective to others who have gone through difficulties like I have.
And now you're speaking in front of me on video in front of thousands around the world. So you are doing just that.
I think that I am fulfilling my pre-birth plan. I hope so, certainly.
Woo! So your motivation is to help others to heal. How does this help people to heal?
I think one of the most powerful things the pre-birth planning perspective does is that it lets you know that you are the powerful creator of your experiences. So, in other words, so often when something quote-unquote bad happens to someone, they feel either that it's a random, arbitrary, meaningless event, and or they feel victimized by what has happened. And what I'm attempting to do here is to say to people, you're not a victim, it's not random or arbitrary or meaningless, it has deep meaning. You yourself planned it, or at least the potential for it. And if you are the powerful creator of that experience, then you cannot be a victim. Now, not everybody likes this, because there are certain secondary benefits to being a victim. You know, people feel sorry for you. You can bond with others who are in victim consciousness. There are benefits to that, and I'm not minimizing them. There's a certain value to that path for a period of time. But it's a path of great suffering. I don't think anyone wants to stay there. And this is a way to leave behind victim consciousness.
So the example that comes to mind, and I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here, but for people who have had real serious tragedy, for example, the loss of a child, the loss of a loved one, paralysis, terrible illness, what you're trying to say is we have to understand that there's a lot more at play going on.
There is a lot more at play, and it's helpful to understand that our perspective in the non-physical realm, where we plan these kinds of experiences, is very, very different than it is here. One of the key differences is that from the non-physical, we're very much aware that no one is permanently harmed by anything that happens here. We're also very much aware that a lifetime is quite brief. It often doesn't seem that way once we're in body, especially if we're suffering, but from the non-physical realm, you know, you see a life as being here like a clap of thunder. It's there and then it's gone. And I think another perspective we have from the non-physical is that we're very much aware that all the wisdom and healing that come out of these difficult experiences become part of the soul for all eternity. So from that perspective, where no one is permanently harmed, a lifetime is very brief, and yet the wisdom and healing are part of the soul for all eternity. From that perspective, it actually does make sense that we would plan big challenges.
Can you repeat that last bit again for us?
So from the non-physical perspective, in which we are aware that a lifetime is actually very brief, no one is permanently harmed by anything that happens here. And yet the wisdom...
sort of like a video game, in a sense.
Very much so. And yet the wisdom and learning and healing that come out of the lifetime become part of the soul, literally for all eternity. from that perspective,
Mm-hmm.
it does make sense that we would plan great challenges for ourselves.
That makes sense. A more advanced video game.
Yeah.
What happened when you started helping other people to have past life regression, or to see this? I'm not sure if you call it that term, to help people to have the same experience that you did.
Well, let me back up and give a little bit of history.
Please.
After I had the session with the medium and the spiritually transformative experience, that was when I first started to think about writing books on this subject. Mm-hmm. What I ended up doing for the two books that I've written is collaborating with mediums and channels who in one way or another can find out what somebody planned before they were born. Now, after the first book came out, this was early 2007, people from all over the world started writing to me saying, I want to know what I planned before I was born. For several years, I would write back the same thing. I would always say, I'm not a medium or a channel. I don't know what you planned. Mm-hmm. You should work with one of the mediums in the book. But then I came into the work of Michael Newton, who pioneered the whole life between lives field. I call it a between lives soul regression, but it's the same thing. I took the training to offer that kind of hypnosis to people. And what happens in a between lives soul regression is that we do a brief past life, but then the consciousness of the client keeps going. It leaves the body in the past life, transitions back to the non-physical realm. Usually they talk briefly with the spirit guide about why they were shown that particular past life. Mm-hmm. And then the guide will take the client to what is called the Council of Elders. These are the very wise, loving, highly evolved beings who oversee reincarnation on Earth. They know everything about you, what you planned, why you planned it, and how you can heal from the challenges you've experienced. So this is now the focus of my work. And when someone contacts me and says, I'd like to know what I planned, I tell them you can do a between lives regression and ask the council. They know.
Fascinating. And you say your book is called Soul's Gift. So your soul's gift, is it always positive understanding that people get? And can you give an example? Just maybe one that touched you of something you heard from the council.
Well, a lot of times the lessons have to do with certain qualities that are important to the soul, and I've given these the name divine virtues. Mm-hmm. There's a list of 27 or 28 now that I've compiled over the time that I've been doing this that have come up most often. These are things like unconditional love, patience, empathy, forgiveness, acceptance, generosity, and so on. So when someone is in front of the council, sometimes the conversation will focus on which of the divine virtues they wanted to cultivate, and then having cultivated it, generally the life plan calls for taking the virtue and turning it outward in some form of service to others. And that theme of service to others is something that I've seen in literally every rebirth plan I've ever looked at.
So that means that, am I understanding two lives here? I don't want to get too technical, but saying you've learned something from this one past life and now you're going to take it and use it in the next life?
Yes and no. So we look at a past life first because we're trying to look at the arc of soul evolution over the course of multiple lifetimes. Generally, the client is shown the past life that had the biggest impact on the plan for the current lifetime. And usually they'll see people in that past life who are with them in the current lifetime, which is a fascinating thing to become aware of. Then they get in front of the council, and the council might say, well, in that past life you were attempting to deepen in, let's say, unconditional love. And you did it to some extent, but you didn't do it as much as you had hoped to. And so in your current lifetime, you set up this challenge and this challenge and that challenge because it gives you further opportunity to cultivate unconditional love. And then once you've done that, the plan is to turn it outward in service to others.
It sounds like hearing this can bring you a sense of, not only can it bring you a sense of purpose, but a sense of peace, making peace for some of the big things that have happened. Like you said, being able to move past victimhood.
It does definitely tell people the purposes of their lives. And I think the peace comes in because a lot of people will write to me and they'll say, I feel like I'm horribly off track. I feel that I'm not fulfilling my life plan. Usually when we have further conversation about it, the person has a sense that there's only a plan A for the lifetime. And that's not true. There is a plan A, but there's also a plan B, C, D, E, F, and on and on and on, so extensive that it's beyond human comprehension. Very, very few people are executing plan A. Perhaps Jesus and Buddha did. But the vast majority of us have defaulted to one of the so-called backup plans, and that is not a bad thing. That's what we expected to happen.
So if I pause you for a second, this means that no matter what we're doing, although we can improve our circumstances, we are not off track.
That's exactly right. You know, an incarnation ends in basically one of two circumstances. Either the soul has been able to do what it came here to do, or the soul concludes it will not be able to do what it came here to do. So if somebody is still in body, then the soul sees tremendous value in that incarnation. Otherwise, the soul wouldn't keep its energy in the body.
A question that comes up from something you said earlier, which is communication with your own spirit, or communication with, I'm getting my own language confused in here, I apologize, what I call the higher self. That we don't always have the clearest connection even with our own spirit, with our own higher self. What does that look like? What does that mean? Because that's a little hard to wrap our minds around, that even though we're a soul in a body, we don't have direct access to our soul.
Well, let's define first what the higher self or the soul is.
Please.
As I conceptualize it, the soul or higher self is what you could call a spark of God. Mm-hmm. And then the personality, which would be you and me and everybody listening, the personality is a spark of the soul in a physical body. So your soul is a vast, multi-dimensional being. It has probably several physical incarnations going on simultaneously, and at least several non-physical going on at the same time. And all of these influence each other. Now, when you talk about having a connection to or communication with the higher self, that connection is always there, but I think it's obscured by the egoic mind, as we talked about earlier. You know, the mind is basically, or the brain is a biocomputer. So as with any computer, the outputs are wholly dependent upon the inputs. The inputs tend to be different forms of conditioning from your parents, your teachers at school, society at large. And there's a lot of untruth in the conditioning. So this is why meditation is so incredibly valuable, because when you quiet your mind and the thoughts that are the result of that conditioning, this spaciousness gives the soul an opportunity to plant seeds within you. And the communication usually comes in the form of aspirations and inspirations. Mm-hmm. Those are the things to look for.
So how do you, I know we spoke before, we'll talk about it at the end about getting volunteers for your next book, but we were talking about you need people who have an easier ability to get into trance. And I know when I had this done, I didn't have that, that easy ability. And so my egoic mind is left afterwards questioning, wondering, dwelling, fighting. How do we help people that when they're hearing those things in meditation or in a session to understand or to open up and get that ego out of the way?
I think you have to learn to differentiate between whether it's coming from ego or coming from the higher self. So some things to look for. Mm-hmm. Again, the higher self will communicate with you through aspiration and inspiration. Your soul will also communicate with you through feelings of excitement and or joy. Those are two of the most common signs. So if you think about something and it gives you a feeling of excitement or a feeling of joy, that's your soul saying, yes, this is the path for you. The soul speaks to you from love, not from fear. So if what you're thinking about or considering doing triggers feelings of fear, that's an indication it's probably not coming from your higher self. And look at the language that you use. In other words, when something is coming from ego, a lot of times it will be presented in thoughts of, I need to, I should, I have to, I ought to. When you hear language like that running through your mind, you know that's coming from ego. Your soul will not talk to you in those terms. It will plant seeds of inspiration instead.
Beautiful. So when you first set out to write this book, your second book, what was your main goal?
I wanted to do what I had done in Your Soul's Plan, explore stories of pre-birth planning, but I wanted to look at the pre-birth planning of a different set of life challenges, and I wanted to focus more specifically and more deeply on how do we heal from the very challenging experiences we planned before we were born. There's a lot of focus in Your Soul's Plan about healing, but even more so in Your Soul's Gift. And I should explain for your viewers, the books are set up, they're organized by type of life challenge. So the chapters are about things like accidents, death of a loved one, alcoholism, drug addiction, blindness, poverty, adoption, mental illness, pretty much any kind of challenge somebody can think about. And then the people I interview have sessions with the mediums or channels in which we bring forward information from Spirit that explains why the person planned that experience before birth. But then in Your Soul's Gift, we also talk with Spirit quite a bit about how the person can heal from that challenge. And there's a wealth of information about healing presented in the book.
Are there some basic tenets of healing, one or two key places for people to start?
All abiding healing, and by abiding I mean enduring, all abiding healing results from an increase in vibration or frequency. So basically what that means when you distill it all down is that the healing path is one of becoming the most loving person you can be. It really is that simple. Yeah.
And how we came here from love, we are love, it's about becoming that loving person. We get this information, we find out more about ourselves, that an accident, a miscarriage, an abusive childhood, that it's all part of this plan. Is there something, how do we figure out where to go with that?
You know, this is something that people ask the Council of Elders all the time, and they emphasize that you have free will. So that's why there are so many so-called backup plans in the pre-birth planning, because your soul knows you have free will, your soul wants you to use your free will, and the choices you make determine which of the plans you end up living out. But basically, again, when you distill it all down, we are here to learn to better give and receive love. So if you want to have a life review at the end of this lifetime in which you feel that your time in body and form was well spent, just focus on the giving and receiving of love.
Beautiful. On that note, let's talk about a few, if you don't mind, a few of the nuts and bolts that everybody probably wants to know. First off, soul groups and loved ones, and the people who come into our lives. Are we going to see them again, for instance?
Most likely. A soul group, as I understand it, is a group of souls who are at more or less the same evolutionary stage, meaning they are at more or less the same vibration or frequency. So you and the members of your soul group take turns across multiple lifetimes playing every conceivable role for each other. You and the members of your soul group will be father and son, mother and daughter, siblings, best of friends, mortal enemies, murderer, and the one who is murdered. And at the soul level, there's no judgment about any of these roles. They're all viewed as steps toward evolution.
Beautiful. And so if we have lost a loved one, there's a good chance we will see them again, and we'll probably see them again once we're on the other side.
You will see them again on the other side, and most likely you will have future incarnations with them.
Beautiful. Yeah. On that note, one of the fun topics you brought up in your second book, pets.
Yes.
So what did pets come here for? I'm kind of leading the witness. That was the first chapter I went to.
The story in that chapter in Your Soul's Gift is about a woman who plans, for reasons of her own, to be a dwarf in this lifetime. She's 4 feet 8 inches tall. Now, she knows in her pre-birth planning that this is going to cause a lot of suffering for her, especially as a child, because she knows that her peers at school are going to reject and ostracize her. So we go into her pre-birth planning session, and we actually hear the conversation she has with her future pets. There are cats there are dogs, there are horses, there's even a rooster named Crooked Beak, and all of these animals speak to her with such great unconditional love. Basically what they say is, we will be there to love you unconditionally when others reject you, which is exactly what happened. So they were the support that was put into place so that she could have the experience she wanted to have.
I love that in front of the council or wherever the decision is being made, that there's a horse who becomes her best friend growing up. She's 4'6". The horse is 15.5 hand, which is relatively huge.
Yeah, and she would come home from school in tears because fun of her, and she had the ability as a child to talk telepathically with the horse. So the horse would say to her, "Climb on my back and let's ride like the wind," and then they would.
Beautiful. What can you tell us about miscarriages?
Miscarriage is something that is often planned prior to birth. So is abortion, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It can be planned for any number of reasons. Again, a lot of the planning of pre-birth challenges has to do with the desire at the soul level to cultivate certain divine virtues. One of those is self-love. So if you are someone who has lost a child to miscarriage, it's a call to greater self-love, and it's a challenge to develop that self-love. Because again, when something like that happens, there are feelings of victimization, or feelings that we live in a cruel universe, or feelings that it's a random, arbitrary, meaningless event. People blame themselves. They think, what did I do wrong? Did I bring about this miscarriage in some way? So often on the earth plane, we learn through the experience of opposites. We choose before birth to experience the opposite of what we eventually want to cultivate as a soul. So it's a challenge to cultivate greater self-love.
On that note, let's go into, I was thinking, and we talked about right at the very beginning, repeating patterns that people get into and being stuck. And one of them is poverty or a lack of abundance or not being able to figure out how to generate that abundance in their lives.
Well, the earth is a school in which the external mirrors the beliefs that you hold internally. Mm-hmm. That is a basic function of life in the third dimension. So if somebody has a belief, and this is true whether it's conscious or subconscious, that they are unworthy of abundance or that scarcity is a fact of life, then that belief is going to outpicture in the world around them, and it will appear to confirm the belief to them. A lot of my work is centered around bringing to the light of conscious awareness these sorts of false beliefs. When you know what your beliefs are, you can choose whether or not you want to continue having the belief. And if it doesn't serve you, like a belief in scarcity or a belief that you aren't worthy of abundance, mm-hmm. then you can bring healing to it and consciously set it aside.
So on that note, what about relationships? People who keep repeating relationships, is this a lesson that they need to learn? Keep repeating, for example, an abusive relationship or just not the loving relationship that they want for this lifetime?
What I see with poverty, abusive relationships, and really pretty much any kind of life challenge you can list, is that if the person is not learning the intended underlying lessons, the challenge tends to recur, and each time it recurs, it comes back usually in more intense form. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. I worked with a woman who planned before she was born to have a spiritual awakening in this lifetime. When I talked with her when she was in her 40s, but she told me a story that took place when she was in her 20s. Mm-hmm. She and her daughter, who was then about 7 years old, were at a swimming pool during the summer. She was lying in a lounge chair in the sun. The girl was playing in the water. All of a sudden, her daughter, who previously had never said anything unusual, jumps up out of the pool, runs over to her, and says, "You're not waking up the way we planned before we were born, so you're going to have a really bad accident." Well, sure enough.
Holy smokes.
Sure enough, shortly thereafter, the woman had a car accident, which did not trigger a spiritual awakening. About a year later, she had a second and worse car accident, which did not trigger a spiritual awakening. And about a year later, she had a third and worse car accident, which finally triggered a spiritual awakening. This kind of pattern I see again and again in the people I work with. So if you have a particular kind of challenge in your life, and if it keeps coming back, mm-hmm. and particularly if it comes back in increasingly intense form, this is your soul really trying to get your attention to look at what's the lesson behind that.
So you've had an accident, you've had 2 accidents. Let's take her as an example. You haven't had that third accident, and you want to try to prevent that third accident. What do you do right now, today, this moment? Well,
you could talk with the Council of Elders, but short of doing that, it would be wise, I think, to ask yourself the following question. If I planned the two accidents before I was born, why might I have done that? And you can phrase it that way because that kind of phrasing doesn't even require a belief in pre-birth planning. Just ask, if I planned it, why might I have done that? And then write down everything that comes to you, the divine virtues or qualities that you might be able to cultivate as a result of the accident, and every other lesson that you can think of. And I think if you just feel your way into it intuitively, it will become clear as you sit with it what it's all about.
Is journaling, the journaling is the way I was taught. Is journaling a great way to do this?
Journaling is a great way to do it. And related to journaling, there's a channeling technique called automatic writing, which you may have heard of. And what you do in automatic writing is that you pose a question to the universe or a spiritual figure who means a lot to you, and then just start writing in a very stream of consciousness manner with your non-dominant hand. And this will basically open you up to be a channel and allow channeled information to come through. It takes some practice. It's not something people can usually do the first time. But over time, with practice, people find that rather than writing down their own thoughts, there's a different tone, there's a different diction, there's a different inflection, and they start to channel whoever it is they pose the question to.
It's beautiful. It's a practice that I use in the mornings quite a bit, and I've actually tried to understand if it's better that I almost feel like I'm woken up to write these things when I'm almost only half awake.
That is a great way to do it. The time when you are half awake in the morning and half asleep right before you go to bed at night, that's a transitional period where the logical mind is not fully turned on, and so it gives spirit an opening to come through.
Fascinating. Beautiful. Well, that's good to know. When, like this morning is another example of the computer turned on at me. I had gotten up, used the bathroom, come back in, I'm ready to head to bed, and my computer turned on, and I'm going, wait a second here.
Yeah.
So are there any other high-level lessons that you want to get across to people today?
I think one of the most important things to understand is how courageous you are for being here. You know, the Earth School, as I understand it, is not literally the most difficult place to have an incarnation, but it is one of the most difficult. And so, you know how generals in the military have that wall of medals plastered across their chest? Well, when you have an incarnation on Earth, it's like getting a medal in your energy field that says, I went to Earth. So as I understand it, when the lifetime is over and you travel around the universes doing whatever you choose to do, other beings see in your energy signature that you were on Earth. And their attitude is one of something like, oh, you know, they're impressed because not everybody has the courage to choose to come here. So honor yourself for having the courage to be here. It's a very challenging Earth School to be in.
Beautiful. I like that. That way you can go, I know the experience that I'm going through, even when I'm completely in the trenches right now, and it feels like crap. That's going to be something I'm going to carry with me for a very long time.
For all eternity, actually.
Beautiful. So a question we like to ask all of our guests just before the end is, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
I feel that way when somebody writes to me or says to me after a session, this session or your book, one of your books, has made a huge difference in my life. It's helped me to see meaning where previously I didn't see any, or it helped me to heal. Any kind of comment like that makes me feel as though my time here on Earth is very well spent, and it's tremendously, tremendously gratifying.
Beautiful. And I imagine, at least for myself, when you're up working late in the middle of the night or up early in the morning and you get that email or letter from somebody, it gives you that juice, that push to help you keep going.
It does. And I save all of those. I'm very sentimental, so I've got a file of them. And I have this image of myself, you know, years from now as an old man in retirement. And I'll go back through those and reread them because they mean so much to me.
Beautiful. So where can people go to find out more, to find your books, and could you mention you were looking for, and I don't fully know the details, volunteers?
Yes, I'm looking for people to interview for my next book. The people who are selected to be in the book will receive a free Between Lives soul regression. But it's open only to people who know from experience with hypnosis that they go into trance easily and deeply. Now, if you meet that description, you can contact me through my website at yoursoulsplan.com. There's a contact page. Or write to me directly at rob.schwartz, SCHWARTZ, at yoursoulsplan.com. I want to invite people also to sign up for the newsletter on the website. On the books pages, there are large excerpts that they can read for free. A lot of good information there.
Beautiful, beautiful. And if you didn't catch that, if you're driving down the road, go to inspirenationshow.com. We'll have all the links, we'll have all the information, and we'll get you over to Rob's site as well. So before we wrap things up here, any last words of wisdom you want to share with people?
I just want to remind people, you are more than the body, more than the personality. You are, in fact, a holy, eternal, and very, very courageous soul.
What more could you ask for? Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you so much for being on the show. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, discover your soul's gift, and shine bright. Woohoo!
Woohoo!
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, it was fun. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!